A high school student time travels to get a glimpse at Arizona's tech future in a series of CGI infused short films. We'll talk with the producer of the award winning marketing campaign on this episode of VFX for Indies. Welcome to VFX for Indies, a podcast about the intersection of visual effects and independent filmmaking. I'm your host, Paul Denegris, VFX artist, filmmaker, and CEO of boutique visual effects shop Foxtrot X-Ray. With me today is Scottie Yang, producer at Ideas Collide, a full-service marketing agency in Scottsdale, Arizona. He's also a freelance producer, editor, motion graphics artist, clothing designer, college instructor, Renaissance man, and all-around cool, creative dude. Welcome to the show, Scottie.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked to be here with you.
Oh, thanks for joining us. On this show, our goal is to bring on guests like Scottie to share their insights into visual effects and film production without going too deep into the weeds of tech talk, with the goal of educating filmmakers and producers who are relatively new to using VFX. If you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe to stay updated as we release new episodes, and you can find our entire back catalog of episodes at vfxforindies.com. As I mentioned, Scottie's a producer at Ideas Collide, and we recently had the opportunity to collaborate on a big campaign for the Arizona Commerce Authority called Future 48, which made extensive use of visual effects to give young people a glimpse into the possible future of tech jobs here in Arizona and get them excited about educational opportunities in that sector. The campaign has picked up a shelf full of awards and has been seen millions of times across the web. Let's get started. Scottie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and education and what brought you to your producing career in the agency world?
Yeah. I would definitely say that like I have one of those less conventional paths to this career. I'm not a film school graduate, that sort of thing. I actually was I started out as a radio broadcast major, and didn't really have like the desire, or at the time didn't really like know what was my motivation going into like the film or the commercial production space and things like that. Although for as far back as I can remember, I've always had a fascination, and I think that's where a lot of my motivation stems from, is like a curiosity factor. I mean, as early as some of my earliest memories are just watching a cartoon, see a commercial, watching a film that I've always wondered, like, oh, how did they do that? How was that made? And like, what's crazy is that same curiosity like still carries me today, and I've learned that is my driving force behind developing the craft and continuing like learning new phases of the production like cycle, if you will. So it's that straight up curiosity, and keeping a hold of that, and being intrigued by the creative process and the production process of creating that. So I'm actually a former college dropout. I was an athlete for about 18 years of my life, and I played volleyball competitively, on the beach and indoor, and I was going to be a professional volleyball player. That stereotypical athlete perspective, right? So while I was intrigued by the radio broadcast. I had fun doing it. Um, that wasn't my primary goal, initially. I ended up actually flunking out of college. Um, and I was back here in Phoenix, and this was probably like '05. And then just one day I was looking at the New Times, and I saw an ad in New Times for Alpha Pacific Institute. Get rolling in digital film production, media, radio. It was a kind of an all facet vocational technical school. and I just kind of called it up. And the guy that owned it and operated it, Michael Petrie, who's actually kind of a media guy, broadcast media guy here in Phoenix, he's still around. So shout out Michael if you happen to come across this. Um, it was basically like a 6-month intensive training program. It was like my job. You go in and you spend like 2 or 3 hours, just kind of like lecture format, and then he basically gave you a task, and you went out for the rest of the day and you produced whatever that task was, and then the next day you come back and you review it and critique it and discuss it and talk about it, and then you rinse and repeat. And that was for like 6 months straight. That's what you did. um, that was like the extent of like my traditional like film school uh, experience, I guess you will. But what was great about that, he taught us Avid Media Composer. And because of that foundational experience working on Avid, that was my lead in to getting my entry level gig, first entry level gig in Los Angeles, um, at a post production like marketing broadcast agency called Studio City. And I went in there in the tape vault as a tape operator and a vault librarian, making tape doves and all that stuff, right, and learning patching machines to, I think they had like 15 edit bays in that facility, and just kind of cutting my teeth. I felt like I was relearning everything over again. It was really a fascinating experience, and I'm actually glad it went out that way. So, and then just from there, just through sheer ambition and will and a desire to learn all phases of post production. And the company saw that in me, and they promoted me to assistant editor, and that's when things really started to open up for me. And it was probably one of the most life changing things that's ever happened to me. And it's propelled me, for 15 years, um, both creatively and technically, because it's a healthy mixture of both. I think that's
Right.
one reason why I love it. The technical stuff has always been a natural to me, right? It was
Yeah.
the creative stuff that I didn't have the craft down. I didn't understand it. And so that was like my grad school to me, those first few years. It was like graduate school for me. Um, so I became an assistant editor at Studio City, and that's when some of the creative stuff really started to blossom, because now I had an opportunity to sit with some extremely talented editors, like extremely talented, and learn from them, and watch their cuts and help them find shots and organize their projects for them. And through that process, right, you're looking at their timelines and you're seeing how they're constructing their timelines. And a big thing for me was, they all emphasized your need to grasp how to handle audio, how to cut up music, how to understand music theory, how to compose, taking like a track and recomposing it based off of the dynamics of the song and what you're trying to do with it in your cut, right? Like next level type shit, right?
Yeah.
That most young amateur editors just aren't thinking on that wavelength, right?
Right.
And then and just sitting with them, and there's a couple editors that would come through, some freelance, some were on staff, that especially if they were a freelancer, if I knew that they were coming in because we booked them for some work, I would I would literally drop everything I was doing. I was like, fuck everything else I need to get done, because I would go and I would just like, I would build a relationship with them, sit with them, ask them questions, and pretty much all of them were so gracious with their time, willing to help out a young emerging editor come, and learn the trade, learn the craft a little bit more.
Mm.
So I spent a lot of time doing that. And then eventually I decided to go freelance as an assistant. I was a pretty damn good assistant editor. It came natural to me, right? Because it's very technical in nature.
Yeah.
And I started, at that point as an assistant, I joined the Motion Pictures Editor Guild, got on their active roster, and then began like, that's the easy part. It's finding the actual gig that's a union gig out there, right? That's the hard part. And I just went freelance, and that's when I kind of entered into the agency commercial production world. Um, and working with some post-production facilities out in like Santa Monica and Venice, that had relationships with like Shy Day and stuff like that. And so that's when I really got exposed to like the super high level, large budget, like commercial storytelling type stuff. And I lied to get hired on some of those gigs, saying I had only known Avid Media Composer up until that point, and a couple of them were Final Cut 7 based. Didn't know a lick about Final Cut, only knew Avid. Um, I remember I applied for a gig as an assistant for a Final Cut 7 based projects, and they were like adamant in bold letters, you must know Final Cut 7 in the posting for it. And I just so happened to know one of the producers, and she kind of, when I talked to her, um, she emphasized, okay, so you're an expert level like in Final Cut. Like, oh yeah, sure, okay, cool. Like, all right, well, come in on Monday, like we'll get you on board, and then we have some work lined up for you. I literally bought a book that was titled Final Cut Pro 7 for Avid Media Composer Users, and I read it in a weekend, and then went to work on that Monday. And that's kind of how I entered in that large budget agency commercial space, which was really, really cool because we were on set. We were doing live captures on set as they were shooting it, direct feed from camera. And then as part of my job as that assistant editor was, to do those takes and then feed them over to the editor that was cutting there. So that was a really awesome experience because then I got to wander around on the lots and like check out what other productions that were going on that had open sets and things of that nature, which was a really, really cool part of that whole Hollywood experience, right?
Yeah.
And getting to work in Los Angeles and stuff like that. Yeah, and then it just I could have, I mean, if I really could have, I could have dedicated my career to being a career assistant editor, and eventually get my way into the studio system where the union gigs are and being an assistant editor, a first assistant, second assistant on film, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I, for some reason, I like to make things hard. I like to challenge myself for whatever reason. And the creative storytelling aspect of all was still a little bit of a challenge to me. Like I wasn't great. I wasn't great at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was still trying to develop that craft. And I knew at a certain point I had to stop taking assistant editing gigs. Everyone was viewing me as an assistant editor, right? And a good one, right? Which was why I was getting gigs. But at some point you have to take a stand and be like, I'm an editor, and that's what I'm going to be. And that means I got to stop taking assistant editing gigs. And that's kind of where it ended up happening, was like, I just had to stop, and it was hard. It was a challenge, because work dries up because you're not taking assistant work. You're working on developing, getting your reel ready, and so you can put it out there and get the gigs. And eventually it started to pick up. Went to work at NBC for a while, worked on some show content there and that sort of thing. And then that's just kind of how it's progressed. And then at a certain point, I did leave Los Angeles for a stint. I did some grad school work. I went and finished my bachelor's. I actually went back to college as a 30-year-old and competed, finished out my NCAA eligibility while finishing my degree. And I was out in South Carolina, and then next thing you know, like, you're so specialized in Los Angeles as an editor, you're just like, well, shit, now I don't have anything to cut. Right. And then you're like, okay, well, then you start to figure out, okay, well, if I want to keep my knives sharp, I just got to go out and start filming my own shit. And so I just bought a camera and I just started filming my own stuff just so I can go out and cut and keep my passion, which was the editorial side, right? And keep developing those skills. And I had no choice. So now I'm out in the field more, right? And now I'm holding the camera, and now I'm producing stuff. Now I'm taking on local clients, right? And I was actually, the school I went to, shout out Limestone University, is hiring me because they knew my background coming in, and they start hiring me to produce some of their athletic content for them, right? So now I'm getting exposed to these other areas outside of what my specialization is, and that's when things really started to blossom for me, right? I'm now developing my craft as a producer, as a director a bit, as a cinematographer and that sort of thing. And I've just built upon that, year after year after year. Whether I'm working with just doing the editing, or if I'm coming up with a story concept for a client that I take on, to producing it, to directing it, or hiring on a director or things of that nature. And that's really, I found a real good niche out of that, is that I can tell a brand story pretty well, right? And that's kind of where I'm like, all right, well, that's my focus. I want to apply a lot of those principles and practices that we take when we're producing or creating a feature length film. Let's apply that to brand storytelling, right? I think that there's a lot of, like, I guess you can call it corporate video.
Sure.
And we all know what the stereotypical corporate video looks like, right?
Right.
Overly washed lighting, lack of narrative, not very entertaining. And that's kind of when I figured out, is like, if I can make something entertaining to an audience, it can be about anything. It could be the most driest content. But if we can tell it in a storytelling, entertaining type of way, like, that's going to hold your audience, right? And it'll be more effective that way. And so that's just my approach now, right? Because I see there's an opportunity in that particular space where we can apply filmmaking practices to, I guess you would call, corporate type of video. And there's so much corporate content and brand content out there, but it's done in that historical kind of bland kind of way.
Sure.
It's like, so if we can apply some of these principles of filmmaking to it, now we're separating ourselves from the pack, right? And that's kind of where I'm trying to push things forward to this day.
Yeah, that's great. When we were working together on Future 48, which we'll come to in a moment, I did notice that you were really well dialed in on the creative side. Like, your ideas and execution were fantastic, and the way you worked with your team was incredible. But then when it came time for you to actually turn material over to us, like, your timelines were meticulous. Your stuff was super organized. You named everything correctly, and I was like, "Who is this guy? Like, this is amazing." I wish every producer client was this well versed. Like, you're kind of a unicorn in that regard. Like, not a ton of producers that I've interacted with have that level of technical execution. So it definitely has served you well.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's probably one of the best ways you can compliment me, is by saying that, and that stems from my time as an assistant editor. For those that may not know, like, assistant editing, you're not doing creative work. Right. I mean, it's technical. I mean, you're setting up projects, you're ingesting media, you're managing the project, you're managing the media in itself. On the server or wherever it may be living, right? And you're sifting through shots the editor for them. So you're doing all that legwork for them, because this is the interesting part, is that when you're producing a TV show, right? It would take us for a 1 hour television show, it's a 2-week turnaround for one episode, right? And a lot of people don't get that. It's literally like a production assembly line, right? And because that creates the most efficiency. Right. So, you're taking the footage from the production team, and it's being brought in, and it's handed off to like a PA or like a transcriber, and they're transcribing everything, and everything's in a certain phase of production, and part of your job as that assistant is to make sure that that production is flowing, and that the editor isn't doing that work. You're paying an editor $250,000 a year. The last thing you want them to do is to be sifting through shots or wasting their time. No, like, you pay, this may sound kind of harsh, but like, you want to pay the assistant who's making a fraction of that, right? And to do that legwork, because you want the creators creating. That's, they need to be creating for 10 hours. That's what their purpose is. And so my time as an assistant editor has really laid that strong foundation for when it's time to go into finishing, and working with guys like your team, is making sure that you're prepping things correctly. Because trust me, in Hollywood, if you don't prep it correctly, I would hear about it, right? So you kind of learn the hard way of when you don't do something correctly. And there's a way to do those sorts of things, like prepping your timeline for colorists, prepping your timeline for VFX, things of that nature. And so that's why I'm like, yeah, like I take pride in that. Like
Yeah.
I'm a little OCD about it actually,
Yeah,
but
you should take pride in that.
yeah,
That's great. I used to. I don't know if you know. I used to teach Avid. I used to teach.
Oh yeah.
I taught film at 2 different colleges for 20 years, and I used to teach Avid, and I wouldn't let my students do any creative editing until they had really mastered the organization, how to organize their bins, how to create thumbnails, how to name stuff, where stuff was stored, because Avid has its own unique architecture. You can be sort of lazy when you're cutting in Final Cut or Premiere. You can just go to Finder and drag an MOV in, and wherever it is, that's where Premiere is going to access it from. But Avid's like, nope, I have to transcode it. I have to put it in my database. I have to put it here, and then the assistant editor has to know how to find stuff, how to manage the database, how to repair the database when it's broken, all of that sort of stuff. And I would drive my students crazy. They were like, we just want to cut. And I'm like, you need to know this stuff before you can cut.
Yeah.
And the ones who stuck with it, they got it. When the people who get Avid really get Avid, and they go, I don't want to cut anything else. But by the same token, like you can learn Premiere or Final Cut in a weekend, because Avid's the foundation. Avid is the root from which all nonlinear editing, has grown.
Totally. And it's like, it's been a while since I worked in Avid, but, cause it's not, in the Phoenix market, it's not in a high demand application. Right. But like, I remember Avid, the best way I can describe Avid Media Composer as a program is fickle.
Yes.
It's a very fickle program. And to your point, it's like you had to do it a certain way or else Avid wouldn't like it, right? Or it would crash on you, or I remember always having, as an assistant, I was always troubleshooting like these random ass errors on Avid. And I just remember I have a quick story about that, because when on that gig that I was working at that post house where they were all Final Cut, one of the owners and like main editors there, they had a leased Avid rig in one of the edit bays because the editor was editing, I think it was Transformers 2. I think it was that time, right? And it was literally my first day on the gig. And he had an Avid error that none of the bullpen of the assistants knew, because they only knew Final Cut. And I was like, hey, it's something I actually know, because I was faking it. I was faking it the entire time that I knew what the hell was going on. And I'm like looking over the shoulders of all these other assistants on like how they were using their hotkeys to export things and stuff like that in Final Cut, right? So like immediately when I overheard someone say, hey, is there someone available that can troubleshoot this Avid thing? I immediately popped up, because I knew I needed to prove myself a little bit. And so I hopped in there, and it was a database error. So you just had to trash your database and then restart it and stuff like that. It was a simple fix, right? But it was like, it made me look like a golden boy, and then what was great about that, I got to sit with him for a while he was cutting some scenes from Transformers 2. And it's like just taking those opportunities, right? Like taking those opportunities to develop and talk to another creative about their perspective from that particular craft standpoint and that trade. I was like, it was one of the funniest things ever. And I'll always remember that. And I remember a lot of the times, just those late night conversations with some of those editors and sitting with them and those sorts of things, because those are the sorts of things that, one, you don't really learn in film school. And it's the stuff that doesn't come out of a textbook, right? It's where you sit and you talk to them and you really learn about scene perspective. Whose perspective is the scene, the characters through, the scene through the character's viewpoint. I learned from, and I'll never forget this guy. His name is Danny Sapphire, and I don't know if he's still in LA or not, but he was kind of known as like the film doctor. How I remember it. He fixed a lot of like shelved films, and he would freelance with at Studio City quite a bit. So Danny was one of those guys that anytime that I knew that he was coming in, I dropped everything I was doing. And I was always there to help him. If you need, hey, Danny, you need something? Like, what do you need? Like, you need a shot? I'll go find it for you, immediately. And eventually we had a pretty good rapport. He's a funny guy. He would invite me to his house after I got off work, because he had an Avid rig there and he was cutting some film stuff over there. And so I would go after hours, after like a 14-hour day, I'd go to his house for a few hours and sit with him, and he would talk to me about what he was working on one of the scenes and the perspective. And it's when you really learn that like really good editors have the ability to one, look at every single frame of footage and creatively problem solve as they're cutting something. And he's the one that was, I don't know, like next level thinking, and from an editorial standpoint, like creatively. I just remember there was one scene where the actress, um, she had to like look in a direction,
Mm-hmm.
and we were scrubbing through the takes, and he was like, I hate all of the takes. It's like, I don't like any of the takes, right? He's like, but it's like, I found something. And he was like, after the director says cut, the camera was still rolling. Someone off camera shouted the actress's name, and then she looked, and he's like, that's it right there.
Yeah.
He's like, so it wasn't even part of the take, right? And he's like, this is why. And he taught me that. He taught me like, this is why you review every frame of every file of every take, because you never know when you're going to get something better than what was the actual take, right? And so that's what made it into the cut, was not the cut of her looking, the takes of her looking. It was the outtake, because the camera was still rolling and he had enough frames to work with, right? And he got a nice, organic, natural looking reaction from the actress, right? And so I'll never forget that, and it's something that I share with the students that I teach in some of the classes I teach, to this very day, because I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's great. I wish when actors receive awards for their acting in movies and TV, I wish they would thank their editors more, because their performance is just raw material until an editor shapes it.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't matter how brilliant an actor is in the hands of a mediocre editor. The performance may not all come together. The story, the arc, it may not all come together. But in the hands of a master editor, even an actor who isn't the Sir Lawrence Olivier or whatever, right?
Oh, right.
They can really shine when their performance is shaped correctly.
That's what I love about it. That's what I love about that, the craft of it, because I mean, you are kind of like a director. Because you work very closely with the director, on these projects, and it doesn't matter. It could be a feature length film, a short film, or a commercial. It doesn't matter. Like, you're working pretty tightly with director. It's a strong collaboration with them. But it's such a mixture of all disciplines within this craft, in this industry. It really is. And to be able to do that effectively is such a great feeling. It really is.
Yeah. So you've obviously been around for a while. Your career has taken, as you said, a very unusual path, and you've landed in this spot where brand storytelling is your jam, and it's what you're good at and what you're known for here and elsewhere. So let's turn the conversation to that as we we move into our collaboration together. So in your opinion, as a brand storyteller, what are the benefits that you see when you bring a VFX team onto a project? Like, why in marketing and advertising and brand storytelling, why would you want VFX to be one of your tools in your tool set? Why would an agency like Ideas Collide bring a team like mine at Foxtrot X-Ray onto a project?
One, it's your ability to elevate the story to be told. It really can. Like, you can, and it comes on different levels too, right? And we've talked about this before, just in our own personal conversations of how we could utilize and lean on you to, and this is such a dirty word in the business, but like, to fix certain things that maybe, that may have been out of our control, right, in production, right? So you do your best you can to capture everything as cleanly as possible, but sometimes shit happens,
right?
And sometimes you need some help, right? And the best way to do that is to lean on partners such as yourself to clean that up or help us fix that, to make it still look authentic and natural, as if we did shoot it through the lens, right? And
Right.
so that's one thing. And you guys helped us with some of that on Feature 48. But
we actually, if I recall correctly, we actually did very little of that, and here's why: because you and I were preemptively having those conversations on set,
which was great. Yes,
we were talking, and I was over your shoulder looking through the lens with you and going, my guess is client is going to ask us to paint that out. Can we just get some grips to move that?
Yes. And so that's one reason that was such a huge help, because, a lot of my experience collaborating and working with VFX teams was specifically related to the post-production aspect, right? So I've sat in those bays, with the artist working in flame to do the finishing aspects of a commercial and sorts of things like that, right? Which is a great experience, right? So to see it from that perspective, but then to now then dive into that same concept, but having to be on set, right? Now we're shooting it and we're shooting it for use in VFX, right? And to have you there and have that perspective was super helpful, because as you can imagine, or probably already know, as a director, like, you are just bombarded with all these things the entire time, right? Scottie this, Scottie that, Scottie this. Hey, Scottie, do you think we should do this? Scottie, so you're having to make decisions like every single moment, on top of talking to your actors, making sure that they understand what their motivation is and what you're trying to get from them, right? Talking with your DP, right? Making sure that you're on the same page with what he sees, with what I was hoping, what I was originally envisioning, things like that. Making sure the lighting's right. There's so many things, right? And just like to have you there as an extra set of eyes, having you thinking through and seeing things through the lens of a VFX artist, as an extension of a creative director on top of that, right? Like, I mean, it was super helpful, because I remember specifically, Paul, that there was one moment inside that Lucid facility where the shot that was planned, when we saw it through the monitor, I was like, this is not fucking working. And I was like full honesty, like, I was like, I don't know what the fuck to do on this. Like, I can't think of another frame or another angle to approach this shot to get what we want. And I remember distinctly, like, you came in, and I think you can sense my anxiety about the situation. And you stepped in, and you said, I remember you tapped me on the shoulder and you said, hey, can I suggest something? And I was like, please do. But like, that's what a team is, right? Like, like, that's the thing, is like, and it's so funny we're talking about it, because I was just talking to my class on Tuesday, and I was like reading through some of their I had them doing like a skills assessment, so I can kind of get a gauge of what they've done, what they haven't done, that sort of thing. And I remember one student wrote, is like, I want to be a director so I can tell people what to do. And I'm just thinking, that's not what directing is, right?
No.
Right. And so, in my opinion, like, to be a good director, it is about that collaboration, but it's nothing about telling people what to do, right? Because even good directors get hung up, and they may not know what to do at the moment. That's why you have a team around you, and to have someone like yourself there that was just as committed to the story and just as invested into the story that the whole Ideas Collide team was, to be in there and to sense that I was kind of at a roadblock that I couldn't figure my way around, for you to step in and be like, hey, I have an idea, or I have a suggestion. And got us through that part. And I'll never forget that. And that's one, like, that in itself is why I would, like, if you have an opportunity to work with your team, you got to take it, because it's going to elevate what you're doing in execution like tenfold,
Well, thanks. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember that, though.
No,
do you remember?
I don't know if I remember specifically the shot, but I do know that came about because we had been working together on the project for like 6 months, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
Right. And we had been on set together for several days back to back. So yeah, but I was able to read your body language and tell, like, okay, he's in the weeds a little bit,
Yeah.
and he needs a push. And I had also earned your trust
Yeah.
by making small suggestions and
Yeah.
looking for those opportunities. Like, hey, this is going to cost us money in post, but if we move the camera and avoid that, or we just get our grips to like move that cabinet out of the frame, knowing that this is the frame you want, like we can remove that, and then we're not spending money. We're not spending your budget, your VFX budget, on stuff that doesn't matter. We're spending it on the
Right.
stuff that really does. I had earned your trust so that I could step in. That isn't the kind of thing that's going to happen. Like we meet and then immediately,
Yeah. It
30
doesn't
minutes
work.
later,
That's not how it works, man.
it's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
It's a matter of building that that trusting environment, and that's to your credit and the credit of everybody at Ideas Collide that I interacted with. Like, you guys were all super open to whatever we suggested, and so yeah, let's kind of jump back in time
Yeah.
and talk about what exactly is this Future 48 thing that we've alluded to a couple of times. What is it? How did the project get started? How did it land at Ideas Collide? And then how did you come to recruit us?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting situation. I know the agency has done some work for the Arizona Commerce Authority in the past, and so I believe I don't know the full details of like how that relationship started, but how I got involved with the project was I was asked. We had done a substantial amount of focus group data and surveying and that sort of thing on to to define and clarify who the target audience was, and who they're trying to hit and what they're trying to do with that. And so this was kind of a comprehensive campaign that was to also include a landing page to help drive awareness. So it was like more of a general brand awareness thing around Arizona's efforts to promote and advance advanced manufacturing in the state, right? So make it enticing, but like not so much as like bringing the companies in. The focus of this was to educate and build general awareness around um, like for recruiting talent purposes, right? And so there was a lot of misconceptions of what manufacturing is, right? Everybody thinks, you think, oh, a manufacturing job, that's not a very fun job. Everybody wants these, easy peasy blue, cushy marketing jobs or whatever it may be, right? And like when you hear the term manufacturing, you're thinking monotonous, boring, maybe overly physical, like labor,
Yep.
dark, grimy, gross, that sort of thing. And part of this whole campaign was to be like, this is not that. This is the future of manufacturing. We're looking, the chip making companies, right? The Lucid Motors of the world. Like, these are not like your traditional manufacturing jobs. These are highly skilled, highly technical, and technology driven careers. And
Right.
they were having a perception issue with the younger demographic, the 18 or even 16 to 24-year olds, right? And letting them know, hey, it's like, you don't have to go the traditional route to find a really good career and build a good life for yourself.
Right.
We will train you on the job. We will pay you well starting out and train you, things like that, and opening up the opportunities. And guess what? You don't have to leave your family. If you grew up here, you don't have to leave your family.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can stay home and find a great job, make a great living, and build a great life for yourself, right? And so that's kind of where a lot of that stemmed from. I was brought in, and I had not been with the agency that long, but I was brought in because of my storytelling ability and my experience, right? And so Matt, our CEO of the agency, said, "Hey, he's like, I would love to get your help, get you in on this project, and we can lean on some of your storytelling." Okay, and so I I grabbed that, I took that PDF of the focus group findings, and I just read it. I needed to get in touch with what we're trying to hit, what we're trying to target,
Sure.
and who we're trying to talk to specifically. And as I'm reading through it, I'm like, shit. I was like, holy cow! Like, this was me when I was 18, like just reading like who the responses and stuff like that. I was like, because I was like, I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do. I knew that I was an athlete, and that's what I was leaning on the entire time. Like I felt in my early 20s, I was like lost, that sort of thing. And like I'm reading it, and like that's what a lot of these responses are describing. And so I just began kind of writing, and I started with a character that was in that demographic they're trying to target, and I just built that out. I just wrote, brain dumped this, and started coming up with this character, right? And then I remember I had a meeting with Ryan Katz, who works with us over at the agency, and we were just kind of talking through it, and we kind of just he and I began to build out like this rough framework of what this could be.
Right.
And I just like took that and I ran with it. And initially it was like there was zero intention of like hiring a VFX team. That all came about with what I wrote. And I was like, okay, like this might be a little ambitious, but I just started going with it, right? I just like, you know what, but like this was like a narrative storytelling type of thing, something that the Commerce Authority hadn't really ever done before with a campaign, and you couldn't deny that the story like hit exactly the things that they were trying to do through that focus group data. And so that's kind of how we're going. And then we were just reading through it, and I was like, okay. And I just told him, I was like, I get it. Like this is ambitious, right? We're teleporting this person through alternate realities that are future based and stuff like that. And so that's kind of where it started. And then I don't know exactly if our leadership team at the agency were expecting that. But as it turned out, Katz, to his credit, he kind of just did some diving on like finding, and I think that's when he came across your company and initiated that conversation.
Yeah, I believe he
this.
found us because we're both companies are members of the APA, Arizona Production Association.
Yeah.
So Ryan, contacted me after seeing me through the APA website. So plug for Arizona Production Association.
Oh yeah.
Great group of folks.
Totally.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. And so that's kind of how it started going. And, everybody was like, this was, was on board from the agency. Like they were, Matt, the entire team, and to their credit, right? Cause they could have easily said, hey, this is probably a little too ambitious for our budget. Right. And they didn't. And it played to one of the values of the agency as this blue sky thinking. And that's the approach I took, right? I was like, I'm shooting for the moon, right? We can figure out a way to scale this back if we need to, but like, I'm always going to shoot for the moon. And then, cause it's a lot easier for me to scale that back than it is to elevate something after I've already written it. Right. It's kind of harder for me. It's harder that way. So, so to their credit, they were all in on it. They loved the story, and so then they were like, let's roll with it. He's like, okay, can you present it to Holly at the Arizona Commerce Authority tomorrow? Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is where I didn't have time to storyboard it. So I used Midjourney to just basically put out some concept storyboard frames for me. Just enough so I can pitch it to Holly. And we did that, and they loved it. She was all in from that point, and I'm sure because she was with us on set. So like she was. And what I loved about Holly, working with Holly, was she said this several times throughout the production time, was like, hey, you guys know what you're doing. It's like, I'm just here to make sure that we're all good, and she let us cook, and you can't ask for a better client partnership than that. You really can't.
Absolutely. There's so many ways that this could have gone, been bogged down with too many cooks, too many people, too many stakeholders having input, and people working at cross purposes. But no, once everybody bought in, and again, I think it comes back to the story. It really does. It's what what made me and my team buy in. It sounds like it's what made Ryan and everybody at Ideas Collide buy in. It's what made Holly buy in. We were all on board. Like, this is a very unique, entertaining way to convey this information. That it
100%.
wasn't dry, it wasn't boring, you wouldn't look at it and go, oh, this was born from a focus group.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's definitely not what you want, right?
Right.
And again, that to me is kind of what I talked about earlier, is like, what can we do as an agency to separate our style of work and what we can do from the dozens and dozens of producers or production companies out there that are producing in the same market segment that we create work for, right? Because they all kind of look the same after a while, right? And it's like, okay, but we want to be able to create something that when someone looks at it, they're like, oh, that's Ideas Collide work, and that's what every creative person is trying to strive for in mastering their craft, right? Is to be able to put your thumbprint of your style and figuring out. It's hard to do, right? That's something that I'm sure like all teachers are trying to teach their people in film school, is like, you really become unique when someone looks at your work and they know it's your work, right? And that's what we wanted to do, was like, let's create something here that's not the same as everything else that's out there, because there's a lot of it now, because everybody thinks they're a filmmaker now, right? And so what can we do to make it unique and stand out a little bit more?
The other benefit that I saw in terms of the way you guys worked was you came to us and your script wasn't finished. It was close, but it had a lot of sort of TBD, effects to TBD, environment TBD. And you guys came to us and said, what can we do? Here are the different areas that we want to talk about. We want to talk about, electric vehicles and aerospace and biotech. And for a while we were talking about solar and a couple of other things.
That's right.
And so you allowed us the privilege of really partnering and being able to say, okay, here's how I think we can maximize production value with the budget you have if we write it this way, or we focus on these areas. And some of that was once you guys started locking in your partners for your locations, like Lucid, like Embry-Riddle up in Prescott, you were sending us photos and kind of explaining, here's what they're giving us access to. Now, what can we do to embellish that? What can we add to this to make it the future? So it was just a really good give and take. And it was definitely a contrast to a lot of projects we get. We're not brought in until post. Like you're saying, like a lot of times you're not interacting with VFX people until post. And that's often a mistake, because having your VFX team part of it early on, at the very least, you're gaining the benefit of their planning input. But with you guys being open and saying, we don't want you guys to just push pixels around. We want you to creatively buy in and guide us through this process and help us add value with your strengths, like that. Yeah, dream project. I've said it
right. Well, and it's like if you are truly dedicated to telling the best story possible, why wouldn't you go that extra step? And and maybe extra step is the wrong use of word, because I don't see it as an extra step. I consider it part of the process. Right. And that sort of thing is, if you really want to be committed to that part of the to the story, that's kind of like, it's hard because I've always been pro artist. Right. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit better about like, that balancing act of the business aspects to the artist, the art, the artistry, or whatever you want to call it. Right. So I'm always going to fight for what's best for the story. Right. And so this collaboration was what was best for the story. And so if that means bringing you on to be our on-set, supervisor for the VFX and having that input, like, I don't think the project and the final output would have been as good if you had not been there. You would have done your best with what you had, and you still would have elevated the project overall and how we were telling that story and what we wanted to visually communicate in that story. But like your presence there, your ideas, your input, your collaboration on location, it brought it up 10 more notches, if not more. You know what I'm saying? Like that's because like you can't do that if all we're doing is sending you footage,
Right.
remotely, and you're doing your thing on that end. Like you're missing a pretty big valley of opportunity within that, And so I see it as like committing, if you're truly committing to telling the best story possible for your client, um, and getting the best possible outcome from it, like it's just part of the process.
Right. Right. How long was the whole process on Future 48? Because I like I said, I know you guys were working on it a bit before we came on.
Dude, I mean, like, dude, we spent, I want to say a solid 5 months just to set up like location scouts. Right. So you got to remember, like, we're working with some very large scale organizations, right? And I'm telling you this right now, like if it wasn't because the project was for the Arizona Commerce Authority and Holly's relationships with these large tech driven businesses, we never would have been able to get access to these places, right?
Yeah.
So like, to the credit of the ACA, like they got us the access to things that if I were me as a producer, Scottie Yang, the director and producer, we're going to try to call these people up and say, hey, we want to film a commercial in your facility. They would have been to go fuck yourself, right? Like there's like no way, right? And
we want to shoot a commercial, not for you,
right,
but for
right, yeah,
else.
not about your brand,
not about your brand, but yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like it's like, and it's like I kind of wonder sometimes, like, okay, if I was like a known Golden Globe winner, it's like, would that have helped? And some of them, I don't think it would have helped. No. Right? Like, no, they would have said, hell no. Right. And rightfully so. Like, I get it, because like you have industry proprietary stuff that's happening, and like, I'd protect that too. And that was their intention. It's not that they wouldn't be inviting to do that, but it's like they've got to protect their business and the technology they're using, and a lot of it in some of these cases were proprietary.
Yeah.
And so totally get that. But it was, I want to say we started in, I want to say March or April of 23 is when like the initial conversations were happening. I was writing things of that nature.
Yeah.
And it took us all the way up until like, I think mid to late July to even go look, because all these conversations with the solar farm, even though we didn't film, that got cut.
Right.
Embry-Riddle, Lucid, what is that? The PBC labs and stuff like that. So it took that long just to go look at locations.
Right.
And then even then, I think it was a week before we were about to shoot, we had to change locations on one of them.
Right.
And so that was, we had everything booked. I remember that.
Right. Lucid understandably decided not to let us, run around with cameras in their actual production facility.
But how cool was that visit though? When we actually got to visit, I mean, I remember how excited we were, because it was everything that was when, as I was writing this out, it was everything, all the visions that were popping in my head when writing it. Like it was everything we had hoped for. I mean, I was like, I remember being so giddy about when we first walked on that floor and seeing that expansive line of robots assembling those cars. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the perfect location. But yeah, and I get it 100%, right? It's part of the job, right? You're having to problem solve and adjust on the fly, so I think it was like a week before we were scheduled to shoot. We had to change it up, rebook the talent, the crews and stuff like that. And we did it, and it was great. You know what I'm saying? Like it was, and it still worked out. And then with your guys' help and your guys' guidance, we had one of their training facilities, and you guys were able to make it look like what was originally inside my head, in the best way possible, really.
Yeah.
Which was
Yeah,
cool.
that was a fun challenge to
Yeah.
now have a much smaller space
Yeah.
with much less automation,
Yeah.
one car, and then to do digital set extensions to really, to blow that out and make it into a full-blown production facility. Yeah.
Yeah,
that
which is
was
probably
a lot
like
of fun.
one of the best shots of the entire thing. Is one of the money shots, really, like
Yeah.
that when he
We're
steps
certainly
back
proud of it.
from that car,
Yeah.
and you see that line of EVs rolling off the line, like I was like, that was such an awesome.
Yeah.
But like, you know what, like my favorite pieces of that weren't, as much as I love those shots and how you did that, in a very subtle use, but were the holograms.
Oh, thanks.
I love the hologram, and to me, those are the ones. It's those little things like that that really accentuate and like really make it feel like real.
Yeah.
To me, is where those, the person walking by on the watch, the hologram from the watch, or the tech inside the airplane hangar, and he's swiping it there, and the work on the PBC labs, that whole DNA strand helix. I mean, that whole thing was so cool. Like those were probably some of my most favorite shots were those.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, I'm a big, Marvel Tony Stark fan, so anytime we get to do fun stuff like that, it's always a blast.
It was
So
fun. It was fun. Yeah.
Thanks. So what's one piece of advice? You've got another producer who's in the brand storytelling space, and they come to you and they say, Scottie, you did all these VFX. Like, I've never done VFX. What do I need to know? What's one piece of advice you would share with them?
That's a great question. I would say be meticulous in your pre-production. And that's like, you could probably say that for any project, VFX or no VFX, right? But I personally saw this as a growth opportunity for me to improve myself by, in the conversations I had, I would send you some stuff in pre-pro, like planning stuff, shot descriptions, things of that nature. And I realized so there were certain aspects where I felt like there were gaps. You know what I'm saying? And so whether that was better storyboards to illustrate each shot, or more storyboards of the in between of the master frames I provided, right? Mm-hmm. Even though I didn't feel like I had the time to do that, things of that nature, right?
Yeah,
a lot more detail, get a little bit more granular with that to provide that over to your team, so you guys can have a stronger picture of what we want to execute, right? And that's what I would say is like, be extremely meticulous with what you want in pre-pro. That way, when you get on location, because inevitably something's going to happen to where like you're going to have to adapt on the fly, but without a strong like plan and strategy on your production days, you can get over those hurdles a lot quicker, right? And so, which we didn't really have a whole lot of problems on production day in our ability to adapt. Right. But I think if I'm nitpicking like my process, I wish I would have had a little bit more granular detail to provide your team leading into production day.
Sure.
So I would take it probably 50% further than what I even provided you.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. So, meticulous planning is always important, especially when VFX is involved, because there are so many moving parts and there are so many ways to screw it up.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's two things I always think about. Two adages that I always say. Planning is invaluable. Plans are useless.
Right.
Because and the other adage is no plan survives contact with reality.
Amen to that.
Right. So we can plan and plan and plan and plan, and then the plan goes to shit the second you walk on set or your location falls through or whatever. and you have to adapt. And the only way to truly to be adaptable is to plan.
Yep.
It's counterintuitive for folks
It is.
that don't do meticulous pre-production planning. They think, well, I want to be able to, make decisions on the fly and be creative on the fly. So I don't like to do a lot of planning. I don't like to storyboard. No, storyboard, shot list, plan. So when you get on set and reality doesn't match what you planned, you can lean back on that and go, okay, here's how I adapt.
Yes.
Here's how I change this shot list. Here's how I cherry pick these storyboards that I need to absolutely tell the story and adapt them to this new environment, this new situation.
Yeah, no, and 100%, because it's like, like I said, I was an athlete for 18 years of my life, and I was also a coach after that for a few years, right? And we always you have a game plan going into your matches,
Right.
And this is for any sport. There's always, the coaching staff comes up with that game plan, right? And there's always adjustments that you make, but you always go in with a sound game plan, because again, it is kind of counterintuitive. Like you think, well, like, then how is having a meticulous sound plan going to help me get over the random shit that happens to us on the fly, right? But
Right.
it does, because it prepares you. You're thinking in that mode, right? And you might have something in that plan that you're able to inject or move around to overcome that roadblock that you're experiencing on set, right? That's why you have those things. You need to have, that toolkit ready to go. Yeah, and that's just one way that I felt like I should have. What it helped me was to build more discipline within my pre-pro process.
Sure.
And that's what really, what like the learning takeaway from me is to develop more of that discipline when you're going through your pre-pro, right? And adhering to that and being stubborn about it, even if you have to. Because sometimes the pre-pro stuff is not the sexiest, the most fun thing to do, but it's it's the nature of the job. It's what you got to do to build a successful team and have a successful production, so.
Absolutely. I mean, Scottie, if you had planned better, maybe we would have won more awards.
Maybe.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the awards that the accolades that the project has picked up, the campaign has picked up?
Oh yeah, I'm trying to remember what they were, to be honest. It's fun, and it's great to be recognized for your work. And I think it was the most recent one. I can't remember the Azima.
Was Azima?
What I love about winning an award for that on the project was that is judged by other creatives,
right?
And that to me is what means the most, is to be judged by a body of our peers, and that's great. And that's really, that lets me know as a creative professional that I've done good work. The team has done good work. And like we're on the right track, right? As I kind of mentioned about this particular angle that I'm trying to approach this brand storytelling from, right? In a more cinematic way. It lets me know that what we're doing is on the right path, and that we need to just keep building and lean into this style of work that we want to do. And it's hard. It's hard to, when you're talking to some, large tech companies, and they've done these overly corporate style looking types of things for years and years and years. And it's hard when you want to pitch them something kind of out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because they unless they see it, it's sometimes hard to get the buy-in. And so that's something that I'm constantly pushing for with some of our clients, and trying to make that happen. And this is kind of like one thing that I told my boss, James, who's been an amazing colleague and coworker and collaborator, is like, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter what my budget is. I'm not cutting corners on my creative process based off of the budget. Like, I'm doing what I'm going to do no matter what.
That's right.
Right. Because you don't change your process based on the budget. right? You still pour your heart and soul into whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And I tell everyone I don't have a middle gear, and I think we talked about this. I don't have a middle gear. It's low or high, and that's it, right? And so like my approach to everything is like I'm not changing the process of how I create something because the budget says so. Like that's just not how it works. Artists don't do that,
That's
right?
right.
And so if it takes me 15 extra hours to do something, I'm going to spend 15 hours to create the best story possible in post, right? Like this is how it works. I don't say, oh, we hit our hours max. I'm done. Let me export it now, that sort of
Yeah.
thing, and ship it off. No, that doesn't serve your customers in their best interest. It doesn't serve your agency in the best interest. It doesn't serve you as an independent artist in the best interest in continually developing your craft, right? And so that's kind of just my general approach on everything.
Right on. I do know we got a telly up here. That's for that project.
Oh, nice. We do have a
Yeah.
That's right.
We got the telly. We got a American Marketing Association award, and the Azima, which is what, Arizona Interactive Media,
I believe so.
Interactive
I don't
Marketing
remember
Advertising,
marketing,
something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and hopefully maybe a couple more coming. And I know it's been performing really well on YouTube, and there's a great case study on the Ideas Collide website that talks about everything, the whole process, including our part of it. And I'll link that in the show notes for this episode. And then on our site, there's a whole breakdown of the work that we did, and some really cool before and after frames and all of that sort of stuff. So I'll link all that stuff in the show notes for folks who want to check out the work that we've been talking about. So what's next for you, Scottie? What upcoming projects? What are you excited about right now?
See here. Right now, we have a few projects that are like early in the pipeline. We're still trying to flesh out what exactly that's going to be, and like how much demand it's gonna pull on our production team. I can't really say much yet because I don't want to
Sure.
say anything that's not fully in concrete yet. But there's some really cool opportunities coming up. It's always tough in these early Q1 months of a new year. It slows down a little bit, and so you're working on building your pipeline up and pitching ideas to clients that you have relationships with and things of that nature. We just actually, there's a really cool opportunity, I think, that's with one of our client partners, Vera Mobility, and they had a really like hot rush need for just a simple montage video on that they were going to put on their booth at CES. They're rolling out this whole connected car division, and that's kind of where the trend is going towards, or these like connected vehicles where you're not just like using it to pay your tolls as you're passing through tolls and stuff like that, but like it's getting even more robust where it's almost kind of like doing a lot of the same things that your smartphone is doing, right? So it's kind of future looking of where that technology is advancing within vehicles. And so I see a really cool opportunity to do some storytelling with there.
Great.
And so I've got a couple things that I've been working on in the background of like story based, like end user experience, ideas that I wouldn't mind pitching, towards, to them. You know, and there's just a couple other one. There's another one that's I won't say the name, but it's a group of like amusement park, um, that have, I think, several locations in the U.S. We've been talking to about potentially doing some work with. So I'm really excited about the opportunity of that, because we do some really cool stuff with that.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of what I'm looking at right now, and then just really working on. We're doing a lot of like wanting to do like more live stream type work as well, like getting live, doing like webinars around a various host of topics, and having conversations around those. kind of expanding on that and like making use of like interacting live with people on channels like LinkedIn from a business like B2B type of perspective, and like sharing some more knowledge. And then I've kind of challenged myself, me personally, myself this year, to write my first feature length script, which I've never done before, but I have, I have like a running list of just like story premises that pop in my head. And so I've decided this year, as long as it takes me, whatever it takes, to start writing my first feature length narrative script. So
Fantastic.
yeah, it scares me.
Well,
The writing process scares the hell out of me, but I was like,
that's good.
I want to do it. I want to do it. Yeah,
that's good. If you're what's the saying? If your dreams don't scare you, then they're not big enough.
Right. Exactly. So I think it'll be cool.
I have another saying, right? A friend will help you move. A good friend will help you move a body. A great friend will help you make a movie.
I'll remember that one.
So, well, you know how to get a hold of me if you need any advice on your filmmaking journey. Been there, done that. I've worked at a bunch of different budget levels, and always happy for an opportunity to chat with you or collaborate with you or whatever. Talk about your podcast a little bit. I was recently over at the Ideas Collide office to record a podcast episode.
Yeah. So I am working with my friend and colleague Alexis. She's an editor, and I talked to her a few months ago about and this has been something I've actually had a desire to do for a number of years now. Just never really put any time or effort into it. I've always wanted to do a podcast focused on artists themselves, like the artists. So I'm talking like painters, sculptors, pottery makers, filmmakers, fashion designers. It doesn't matter, like artists, even like comedians. It's an art in itself. Like I would really love to talk to and have a conversation with some comedians as well, because I really do feel like their craft is an art form as well in itself as well. And so it's called the Artistry Forum. We're actually still in the early phases of production on it. We're trying to get a bunch of episodes in the can first before we launch the podcast. But it's going to be called the Artistry Forum, just really focused on the stories of artists themselves, talking about their craft, their process, where they started, their influences, how their work may or may not influence our society, our culture. So we've had so far we've talked with the colorist of the Future 48 campaign, and he's a colorist for film and TV. PJ is a good friend of mine as well. And we've also talked to a good friend of mine from graduate school, Christopher, who's an artist, a painter himself. He does mostly like really large format picture paintings and in an abstract form. And super cool guy. Really stoked about that. Plan on talking to some of my fashion design mentors about their creative process and their story and their path of what they're doing in fashion design and how they're changing the game in fashion. So just super fascinated with various artists, just creative process. And I see it as like an opportunity to learn about someone's process that I could potentially incorporate into my own, right? And getting that perspective and just hearing about them and their backgrounds and their stories and what motivates them, what's inspiring to them and things of that nature. And so that's largely what the motivation is of why I wanted to put that together, because I don't know, it's like there are so many amazing artistic people out there in the world that aren't like household names. Right. And like we only hear about the ones we read and see on TV, but there's so many more amazing artists that we never know anything about. We don't hear about them. We don't know they exist or anything. And so I wanted to create an opportunity to just talk to those people, working artists, just like in Hollywood, there are a cajillion working actors that are making a great living for themselves, but like they're not household names. We only hear about the A-listers, right? And the big times, but not realizing that there are, probably 10 to 20 times more people that are making a living and building a life for themselves doing doing that craft, right? And so I feel the same way with artists in general. And I just want to hear about them. I want to hear the story, hear the path, because everybody has a unique story. So let's hear about it and learn from it even. So
that's great. Well, when your episodes start to drop, you'll have to let me know so I can share it with my audience.
Yeah, for sure, man.
And point them towards the other half of our conversation.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Scottie. I really appreciate you being part of the episode, and always a pleasure to talk to you. You're just a super upbeat, positive dude. So I love your energy.
Oh man, I appreciate Paul. You rock, dude. You're a badass, man, at what you do. Always, anytime you would need anything from me, man, I'll do it for you, man.
Thanks so much. And that brings this episode of VFX for Indies to a close. And in addition to thanking Scottie Yang for being our guest, I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning into our discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment or a review. Whatever you think will help. Every little bit helps us get the word out about our show. For Foxtrot X-Ray and VFX for Indies, I'm Paul Denigris. Thanks so much for being part of our VFX community.